wait, this is insane that a fifth of the world is still burning kerosene as their primary source of light. I mean, well over 1 billion people. We could see these simple products just totally create this massive transformation in people's lives. I remember people crying because the product had impacted their lives so much. And I kind of realized like, oh man, we have to do this. I mean, if we don't do it, I don't know if anyone's going to do this. And even in the fail scenario, I think we'll at least get a few thousand people light, and that is worth it. I mean, from what we could see. So we said, let's do this.
Welcome back, Solar Warriors. I'm your host, Nico Johnson, and this, of course, is SunCast. If you are new here, I just want to say thank you so much for giving us the only non-renewable resource you've got. That is your time. I promise you're going to get an amazing return on investment today, especially if you, like when I first got into the solar industry, asked yourself the question, well, what do we do about the billion plus people at the bottom of the pyramid who don't even have access to regular light? Every day we walk into our bedrooms, our offices, our bathroom. We flick on a switch that magically illuminates our dwellings, and we completely take for granted that we have this luxury, let alone organized education. Today's guest and his business partner, Ned Tozun and Sam Goldman, founded their company exactly to address this and many other issues that developing nations are facing around the world. Founded in 2007 with a mission to provide safe, affordable, and sustainable energy for all, d.light has been creating solar-powered products for the 2 billion, I misspoke, the 2 billion worldwide who just don't have reliable access to energy. And it all began with affordable, durable solar-powered lamps. Perhaps you've seen a d.light product. Perhaps you've purchased or donated one. You would have joined the hundreds of thousands around the world who have participated in this journey with Ned and Sam. Ned has been named onto the Time 100 climate list for 2024, featuring the most influential leaders driving climate action. 75 million school-aged children have been reached with their solar lighting solutions. The numbers are frankly staggering. And now d.light aims to reach 1 billion people by 2030. Today, we are going to get into the story of why this is the one thing that Najib and Sam couldn't not do, and how they converted this passion idea into a product and a business that has now endured for over a decade. If these are the kinds of conversations that you enjoy, you're in the right place. I hope you'll subscribe. Hope we earn the reputation of a podcast that you will return to time and time again, like thousands of our fellow climate champions and solar warriors. But for now, let's buckle up and get ready for this conversation with Najib. Well, Najib, welcome to SunCast. It's been a long time coming. I'm so glad to finally have you here.
Yeah, Nico, it's great to be here.
Your story is one that I think will go down in the annals of rural electrification. There's all the folks that were sort of involved in helping America, have this cooperative explosion of power in the mid 1900s, and then there are entrepreneurs like you who basically took those innovations and cut the wires and spread that spark around the world. So, Ned, I've heard you say that it's just not right that in the 21st century, 1/5 of the world still uses kerosene lamps. What did you see or experience that made this reality very personal for you?
Well, it really started with my business partner, Sam's experience living in Africa. And then I had a personal experience, after that, but I'll start with his, because that was really the spark that ignited this whole thing. So Sam, also an American, but grew up in India, Pakistan, parts of Africa, because his parents were working in development. And he was living for several years in West Africa, in Benin, a small country next to Nigeria. And while he was there, he was actually living in an area, because he was in Peace Corps at that time, was living in an area without electricity. So he himself was actually using a kerosene lantern out there. And while he was there, his neighbor's son was burned in this terrible kerosene accident. So the lantern tipped over and this boy was totally burned. And Sam, had this experience and realized that, wait, this is insane that a fifth of the world is still burning kerosene as their primary source of light. I mean, well over 1 billion people. And when Thomas Edison invented the light bulb, the whole population of the Earth was less than that at the time. So actually, there are more people burning kerosene, 10 years ago as their primary source of light than before electricity was invented. It's insane. So, this to him felt like an injustice, and he wanted to do something about it. So I connected with him he went to business school to figure out like, how do I do something about this? Because this seems like people are spending a lot of money on kerosene. It's a terrible solution. There are technologies that should make this obsolete, but businesses don't seem to care and they're not doing anything about it. So I want to do something about it. So that's kind of what sparked it for him. And I met him in business school, and I had sort of a different path that led me there, but very much aligned in terms of values with Sam. I grew up in Silicon Valley, but my dad immigrated to the U.S. from northern Cyprus, which is in the Mediterranean. It's an unrecognized country, and I would go there every couple years as a kid. And although it wasn't off grid, it was also very different from Silicon Valley. And I had this sense of contrast growing up of like, wow, I mean, I'm in this other part of the world with I have a family, and they're cut off from a lot of the rest of the world because it's this unrecognized country, and infrastructure is not always working. And I saw this gap in opportunity access that I got to have in Silicon Valley versus what people had there just based on where they were born. So that really kind of impacted me at a young age. And at the same time, I really loved technology. I loved entrepreneurship. I like creating things and bringing them to the world. And so I was just really excited about this idea of kind of merging those things together and finding a way to leverage those powerful forces in the universe of creativity, innovation, technology, and use that to really make people's lives better in other parts of the world where they didn't have the same access to opportunity that I got to have. So when Sam and I met and connected, we realized that this is a moment in time where we could actually do something about this. The technology was there and the opportunity was there, and it was just a matter of going after it.
I'd love for you to put us in the moment in time specifically that you're referring to. What year was it? And also, the thing is, most people stop at being outraged or even inspired, frankly, by a story like this. You guys came together and you built a global company. How did you go from that spark of an idea to a business model that you could actually scale?
Sam and I met at Stanford in 2006. And basically, that's where kind of all this got started. And initially, we actually met in this class at the Stanford Design School called Design for Extreme Affordability. And the design school was called the Stanford D School, the D.Dot School. So we were a project within the design school. We called ourselves d.light because
that's where the d.light name came from.
Yeah, that's where it came from. And we want to delight our customers. I mean, that's like, so it's a good guiding principle for us. But that's where the name came from. So we connected there, and the design school had this amazing partnership with an organization in Myanmar in Southeast Asia, where it's pretty much all unelectrified there. And we had a chance to take a couple of trips there where we could bring prototypes and, test things out. And I think for me, that was the moment, in bringing some of these very basic prototypes to these off-grid areas. And these were very flimsy things. And at the beginning, I mean, not robust, not very pretty, but we could see these simple products just totally create this massive transformation in people's lives. I remember people crying because the product had impacted their lives so much. And just all the like kind of commotion in the village about this new thing that could replace kerosene. It was so exciting. And I kind of realized like, oh man, we have to do this. I mean, if we don't do it, I don't know if anyone's going to do this. And even if we fail, I mean, I remember having this conversation with Sam, like even in the fail scenario, I think we'll at least get a few thousand people light, and that is worth it. I mean, from what we could see. So we said, let's do this. So that's kind of what got us going. And by the time we graduated, we raised a little bit of seed funding to get it started. And, we went for it. Then Sam moved to India to figure out how do we sell the products as our first market. And I moved to China to figure out how do we make this stuff very affordably and at high quality. And that's how we started.
There's a little bit of a fork in the road when you think about, I was a Peace Corps volunteer, same as Sam. When you think about not just creating a product, but introducing it to essentially a foreign community, one that neither of you are native to. So I want to unpack that a bit. When you look back at those early years, which was harder? Building a product that was both rugged and sufficient for daily use in this harsh environment, or building trust with the communities who had never before even seen solar?
They were both pretty hard, to be honest. It's hard for me to say which one was harder because actually getting the product right and to hold up in the actual conditions that our customers live in. I mean, these are tough environments. It's
Yeah.
humid, it's dusty, it's hot.
Yeah.
The products are getting dropped and kicked and all kinds of stuff are happening to them, but they have to survive. They have to be
Right.
robust. The initial products that we could find and put together, they just would not hold up in these environments. So
Mm.
actually getting that right and at the right price point, because our customers are also, they can't afford very expensive products, obviously. So we had
Right.
to get it low price and super high quality. So that was hard. But the other piece of it, building the trust in the communities, getting people to try it out, that was also really hard because even having a product that's great, it's the right price, the right quality, not easy to do. But these are people who are very risk averse. Typically, customers
Yeah.
living in rural environments are not first adopters of new technology. And in fact, I remember some communities that our salespeople or we would go into to bring these products. There was one community actually where we got chased out because the previous time they had seen solar, it was fraud solar. Basically, it was like a fake solar
Oh.
panel. And so they just thought we were out selling them junk,
Oh my
so they
goodness.
were trying to rip them off. So we got
Yeah.
chased out because they just didn't know what solar could do. So
Mm.
typically what we would do is to build trust is to find like who is that influencer in that community, the
Yeah.
leader or whoever it would be, maybe offer them the product to try out. People
Right.
and light is very visual. People come and kind of aggregate around it. And when they see it actually works, then you start building this momentum. And now, I mean, this fast forwarding a long time, people understand what solar is. They understand our brand. And we don't really do marketing. It's all word of mouth because our products they tell the story. I mean, they last for years and years and years. We always try to like over deliver what we promise because
Yeah.
we know ultimately that's what builds the brand. And especially in these rural communities, they are
Yeah.
at the one hand super risk averse, very slow to adopt. But once they trust you and once you really deliver, they actually are very loyal, much more so than urban customers.
This is fascinating. So you guys were engaging in an early form, 2000. This is the late aughts. You were engaged in an early
Yeah.
form of influencer marketing, one that is still palpable today, certainly for developing countries. But I can just imagine because I lived in a town where like half the population still didn't have electricity. I can just imagine all of a sudden one day someone has a d.light in their house and the conversation starts to run like the rumor mill. Did you see this? Like, what is that? And that level of viral marketing is super palpable. It makes me think about kind of which came first. Is like it's not as though you have the luxury of focusing only on product or only on community because the
Yeah.
community needed to know that this product would work, but then you also had to create a product that would stand up to the test of time. I'm curious though, because you went in starting to offer the product, which one really moved the needle when you think back on those early years? Was it that focus on storytelling and building that trust and community, or was it being the ones who had the reliable light?
Well, I think it fundamentally came down to having the right product because you could see
Ah,
that there were other attempts to bring these kinds of products, these communities before, but they just wouldn't last. So then you can get an initial spike, but then it all crashes if the product doesn't
right.
work. So I think cracking that was important. But the other piece, was so important too because you can't sell it
Yeah.
unless you build the trust. So that's kind of why Sam and I think why our partnership was so powerful is that we kind of divided it up between the two of us. And like, it was my responsibility. Like, I got to crack the product. I mean, obviously I would talk to
Right.
Sam about it a lot. But that was my thing. And he was figuring out like, how do we actually sell this? Because both were super hard problems. And it needed 100% kind of like founder focus. But I think with the two of us, because like I said, we had so much values alignment between the two of us and we may tactically disagree on things, but we're always on the same page on the big stuff. We could really trust each
Yeah.
other to figure that out. And of course, we would talk and brainstorm and debate about all kinds of solutions along the way. But I think having each of us driving those in those geographies really is what enabled it to happen.
One thing I hear is this customer centric focus, really being able to, and I've heard you talk about this on other shows, be customer focused in the design. In that sense, designing with your customer, not for them. I'd love it if you could tie that to some story where actually field testing fundamentally changed the way that you built or marketed the product.
I always learn from our customers even today. And I think you mentioned this, Nico, and it's a really important point that in this case, we are not our customers. If you're an Apple
Hmm.
designer or something, you're also the user of the product. I mean, of course, I use d.light products, but I'm not living in an off-grid village.
Right.
So we have to go in with with humility, with a mindset of like, we need to learn from our customers. Their preferences might be different from our preferences. We can't assume. And what might be like what our instincts tell us may be wrong. So
Yeah.
I think we've always kind of gone in with that mindset. And there's so many examples along the way. I'll just pick one kind of from the early days. I remember we were testing different color temperature of the lights. It could be
Mhm.
like more yellowish, more bluish.
Right.
And in the US, we all like yellowish light. I mean, that's sort of
Right.
where our lights are tuned to, and bluish is like harsh and we don't like it. But blue, by the way, is more efficient. You actually get more lumens per watt. There's some benefits to it.
And it's closer to natural light.
Yeah, and with our customers, they hated the yellow. They hated it, and they liked the bluish light because it looked like kind of the fluorescent lights they would see in town in terms of the color temperature. The yellow reminded them of kerosene. Yeah, so the blue to them was modern, whereas for us it looked kind of harsh. But they strongly preferred it, and actually you could see more under that bluish light than the yellowish light. So that's just
That
one
is so
example of
fascinating.
where our preference is different from theirs, and we have to respect what their preferences are because they're our boss. I mean, we have to serve our customers, and we're always learning from them. And even today, I go out and I still get insights, and their preferences are changing. It's not like a static thing.
Yeah.
And what's interesting too is we have people we employ like in Kenya and Tanzania, and like people who have grown up in the urban areas, but even they don't really know really about with the rural customer because they may have grown up in a village, but it's been a while since they were living in that kind of community.
Yeah.
And we just have to even then go in with childlike mindset and humility because we need to learn from them and really have to ensure we have products that delight them. We need to listen to them.
I love that delight is such a core piece of the brand and the vernacular that you use that is integrated just in even how you tell the stories. Thank you for that. You did something remarkable as well. Having had an already international background, you moved to China. It's funny, like every decade, it kind of gets easier to move to China. In the aughts, it was still not super easy to be an American living in Southeast Asia, frankly,
Yeah.
not nearly as easy as it would be today. Yet, I think you recognized that there was a need for hands-on management. You moved there to manage the manufacturing yourself to ensure the success of the product, as we talked about. Can you talk about that decision and how it changed the trajectory of d.light?
It was one of the most important decisions we made. In those early days, we just had graduated, got a little bit of seed funding,
Mm.
and we had a founding team of 5 of us.
Hmm.
And it became clear, at least to myself and to Sam, that if we're going to do this, we have to be on the ground.
Yeah.
There was just too many moving parts. If we were really going to deliver, the quality and the cost of the product, someone had to be in China.
Did you draw straws? Like, who has to do this?
Kind of. I mean, it was almost like that.
Oh,
And then
gosh.
someone had to be on the sales side. Sam and I did have some debate who should go where, and
Yeah.
finally kind of settled on it. We initially thought maybe both of us in India, but then we realized
Yeah.
no, someone needs to be on the product side.
Mhm.
So that was a tough conversation with the founding team because not everyone was in a situation where they could move. So that kind of
Right.
broke up the band in a way for that early team. So we had 2 out of the 5 who weren't able to move, and then they moved on. I mean, very amicably. I think everyone
So the
understood
other
why.
3 basically were no longer a part of the founding team because they couldn't commit that level of like dedication and grit.
Yeah, the 2 left, and then 1 moved to China with me. So
Wow.
his name's Cien, and Cien Yiwu. So he was originally from Singapore. His dream was to kind of work as an engineer in the U.S. at Stanford. So
Yeah.
went to Stanford, but was so passionate about this, moved, and led the engineering team there. He's an amazing person. So he's someone.
Amazing.
So he's part of that core story too. So he took that plunge, and he and I went to China. Sam moved to India, and then we went on from there and built the team.
What is your recollection in those early days? I mean, you're starting from zero, but you have the Stanford network. How do you go set up manufacturing as a startup focused on something that is essentially from our American perspective, like a new product category? It turns out it's not in other parts of the world, but you guys were creating something that was quite novel in its application.
Yeah, and it was difficult because for a lot of these Chinese manufacturers, they're really looking to partner with companies that are already at scale. So to be kind of working as a startup and to want the low cost, high volume.
I need low cost and I need a dozen of them.
Yeah, right. I mean, we were like the worst worst customer. For these manufacturers, we're just not the profile they want. So it really required building a relationship, finding the right connection. I mean, we met so many different factories, manufacturers, and it's as much of a sale process to them as it was to the investors. I mean, because they
Yeah.
really had to be willing
Mm,
to commit, invest, believe in the mission,
right.
and believe in what we were doing. And we ended up finding one. It was, I think, through the Stanford network. It was someone got connected to through Stanford, who then knew manufacturers. He set up some meetings, and yeah, this one partner, just really was inspired by what we were doing and said, "I want to be part of this story." And yeah, that was our first manufacturing partner that got us going, and it was we're really thankful for them.
Yeah.
And they ended up moving on to kind of a different sort of business model over time. So we sort of eventually parted ways, but and moved to other partners. But that was our partner for the first 4 or 5 years. We
Oh
wouldn't
my goodness.
have been able to get started without them.
That's fascinating. And it's also, by the way, like I was getting into the solar industry at the time. At this time, like no one in the solar industry was really focused on nanoscale solar. Everyone was focused on expanding the scope of solar, installing on houses and in large utility scale projects. So like we saw solar panels go at that time from about on average about 170 watts per panel to a lot bigger than that. Like now averaging around 550 to 600 watts per panel, where you're
Yep,
asking them to basically miniaturize the product, which is,
exactly.
I mean, it's asking a lot of a burgeoning manufacturing society. But it was also asking a lot of the other stakeholders that you mentioned, that's your investors.
Hmm.
You all were early innovators in this model called pay as you go or PAYGO,
Yep.
and effectively securitizing these distributed assets, which were being paid in foreign currency. There's forex risk. These aren't exactly dinner table conversations, even with American VCs. I'm really curious to understand, how did you convince investors that financing lanterns in rural Africa could become a scalable and bankable asset class?
Yeah, and I mean, it evolved over time because our initial business plan didn't include this pay-as-you-go model, didn't include, we were doing last mile distribution at this point. That wasn't our initial plan. We kind of had to do these things, especially as the product line evolved. So, you could think people got access to a solar lantern, changed their life, but that's not the end of the road for them. They want everything we get to have with electricity, and they
That's
want
right.
it through solar. And the way to deliver that with the way this pay-as-you-go model works is you make the payments affordable every day. So
Hmm.
people pay via mobile money, which is actually ubiquitous in the market we work
Yeah.
in. They can pay 30 cents a day or 50 cents a day, 20 cents a day, depending on the product, just like you would pay a utility, almost like a prepaid utility. But then instead of just burning that money away, now they're investing into an asset that they'll eventually own. So that's how that works. And we can remotely unlock or lock the device, based on if they paid.
Did you do it the same as like phone cards? You could do the same way. People would recharge their phone daily pretty much in Latin America and
Yeah,
Africa.
it was very similar to kind of like the phone recharge model. So that's
Hmm.
it was something people understood. And
Is
it
it,
was, yeah,
is it like scratch cards? Like how did you activate it? And did you build this technology or did you license it from someone else?
we built it. We built the technology because there wasn't
Wow.
anything that existed. It wasn't, we looked at scratch cards actually, but we found it was just more efficient. They would pay via mobile money. We'd send an unlock code to them
Ah,
that was specific to their device that they would punch into the device.
huh.
And then it would unlock for that period of time. And then once they
Amazing.
got it paid off fully, there was an unlock code that would permanently unlock the device. So that's how that
Oh,
worked.
wow. So there was a period where you know what I love about that is you weren't locking them into what is so common in our American society, this long-term revenue stream, right? This
Yes, yes.
subscription. You were actually providing them with an asset they could pay off and own. I love that.
And that was really important, by the way. And one of the key, talking about like what we heard from customers, because there were other companies that came into the space as, saw this as an
Mm,
opportunity, looked at the subscription model, and saw, oh, can be cash flow forever from these customers. But when we talked to our customers, like owning their own power, it was so important to them. And we knew in the market, if there was both options available, even if the subscription model is cheaper, they would
yeah.
prefer to do the version where they can own the asset. And we found that. I mean, so when we competed in the market, you know, anyone who's on the service model, customers may do it for a while, but then they're like, wait a minute, I'm never going to own this. And I'm just paying you forever. That doesn't seem
Yeah.
right. So then, they would stop paying. And so those
Yeah.
companies either went under or moved to a different model. But it's because we listened to our customers. Um, Yeah, but it's a unique model, and it's something that really enabled a lot of scale. And in terms of like why how we got investors, to buy into this, I think initially, frankly, it was a lot of impact focused investors. So
Right.
investors who were not just looking at the ROI. It was really hard to get commercial investors. We did get some venture capital in the early days, but it was a small percent of the mix. It was mostly impact
Yeah.
funds, where they wanted their money back, maybe
Hmm.
with some return, but it's not the same kind of,
They saw
you
the
know,
vision. Yeah.
yeah, and not the same kind of return expectations. But then over time, as the models started getting proven out, then we started getting more like private equity type investors. But
Yeah.
even those investors we got had some either focus on Africa, which is where a lot of our business is today, or had some angle around, alignment with the mission.
Yeah.
Because even if we could offer more commercial returns, we're operating in riskier markets. We're operating in
Yeah.
place, in areas that are, maybe not as much of a slam dunk as
Hmm.
other investment opportunities in developed
Right.
markets. So I think finding aligned capital was important.
Impact investors can be very patient. We call that patient capital, right? VCs, private equity is not. Is there a moment where you reflect back and that you felt the most tension between the drive for some sort of financial return versus the social mission? How did you navigate that as a founding team?
Yeah, and I think it, especially in those early years. I would say like the first 5+ years. I mean, things were took longer and were harder than we were expecting. I mean, when you have like
For
for
every
distribution, for
founder.
example. Yeah, I know for every founder, but I think especially in the markets we're in because we the distribution wasn't organized. We had to then connect with each individual retailer, make deals with them and have
Yeah.
sales agents in the communities to do servicing, all that kind of stuff. The pay as you go model, there weren't partners actually we could work with. We had to do it ourselves. So a lot of these things we end up having to build ourselves because the infrastructure and the rails aren't there. And that just means it takes longer. It requires more capital to kind of get there, get to the end state. And so having that, I'd say like a patient capital, it was super important at the beginning.
Mm.
We did have, I would say, some less patient capital also in the mix at the beginning. Thankfully, the majority was more impact related capital, and I think
Yeah.
that sort of gave us the breathing room. But we did need to find some paths to get an exit for some of those earlier funds because they have their fund life ends. They need to get a return, and we were able to get secondary and an exit for them and arrange that. But that creates some tension when you have investors who as their fund life gets to the end, they're going to be more focused on getting their exit than necessarily thinking about the long
Yeah.
term for the company. So just making sure you have we try to make sure we have a path for exiting those investors, so we don't have that tension.
And it becomes a distraction for you as well as a founder and as a
Yeah.
CEO. You have to now think about an additional complex sort of algorithm. Where did you go for advice on that?
Gosh, I mean, I've gotten so many good sort of mentors and advisors along the way. I've had there was a chair of our board like back in that time. He was representing one of the investors, but he wasn't actually working for the fund. They just kind of appointed
Yeah.
him, and he had been an experienced CEO and then sort of had worked on the investor side. And I think people who had sort of worked on both sides of the table, who
Yeah.
run operations, they understood the realities of what I was dealing with. I could be open about all the different operational challenges and stuff we were dealing with, but who also kind of understood how the investors thought. I thought that was really good because I really didn't do a good job in those early years of interacting enough with the investors and sort of managing some of those relationships.
Huh.
I thought I'm just focusing on the business,
Right.
but actually kind of understanding their constraints and where they're coming from and making sure you kind of are solving for that is quite important because if you don't address that, then it can create significant problems down the road and it can start having operational impacts if you don't deal with it. So I think
Yeah.
I've learned over time that that's an important part of my job is to make sure all those stakeholders, understanding their interests and making sure we kind of take care of everybody along the way.
Yeah. And as the CEO, you've got to manage external and internal stakeholders. And that leadership balance is one that a lot of founders don't get right, frankly. I've struggled with it, and many of my friends have struggled with it. I know that you have said that a key to scaling is learning what you need to let go of. Like,
Yeah.
how do you let go of control? What do you see as the hardest role or responsibility that you personally had to hand off? And what did it teach you about leadership as a company grows?
Yeah, and it's really interesting because I think as a founder, this is like a lesson I continue to have to learn, to be honest. I mean, it's of what to let go of, but also like where to di like deep dive on things and get into the weeds because sometimes you need that as well. And I almost think of it like you're flying an airplane, and sometimes you need to go lower altitude, sometimes you need to pop up. But if you're always at a low altitude, you're gonna miss the bigger picture. But sometimes you got to go in there and get into the details. So I think there's some of that you just kind of learn with time, experience, and you make mistakes, and sometimes stay too high level for too long, or go too deep and know everybody, and get into the weeds too much. So, and it's still something I'm figuring out. But I think probably the hardest thing uh, that as we've scaled up to kind of either delegate or to not have as much control over is really the culture of the company because I mean obviously I set the tone as a CEO of the
Yeah.
culture, but we have now lots of different countries with different managing directors. We have sort of like guidelines on, here are our values, here's what we're going to reinforce. But, each of these leaders are also creating the culture in their own teams and to make sure that they're aligned and getting
Right.
their buy-in, all of that. But I'm not the one setting the culture in each of these individual offices. They're going to be looking to the country leader and then the leaders of those
Mhm.
teams and kind of making sure that that gets propagated down rather than all being sort of the force of, a couple of founders, I think has been something that has taken time for us to figure out how to get right. I think now we've been able to figure out how to recruit people who kind of build the right kind of culture, how to reinforce it. But because when you have like 1,000 people instead of 50, you're not going to know everyone's name. You're not going to know all the details, but you want
Mm,
like people to be living the values that you
right.
set and have that propagate down even if you're not, making all those decisions. So I think that's been something that I've given a lot of thought to, and it's sometimes a little hard to let go and let
Yeah.
these countries run, and then you got to try to make sure they're aligned, but you can't like be in there in every decision they're making.
What's worked for you? And I'm thinking particularly like modern tools. We've got podcasts, we've got video. Well, are there particular methods or approaches that have worked for you to sort of duplicate yourself and communicate that message in a one-to-many way?
Yeah, I think video messages are great. We
Yeah.
do those where both me, other people in our senior team, we can give messages to the whole team, so that everyone's
Yeah.
hearing the same message. It's not being propagated, through a broken telephone. So I
Yeah.
think
So,
that's important. And I think the other thing we've done well is like really very sharply define our values. So it's
mm,
encapsulated in this acronym I hope. I is being
uh-huh.
innovative, H is honest, O is optimistic, P is passionate, and E is empathetic. But there's kind of lots of examples we build within that and lots of stuff that we do to reinforce those values. So we have like these I Hope awards every quarter. We kind of like call out, people can call out each other for living out the values, telling stories. We tell stories at the town hall about what people have done on the values. That's like a framework we use when we recruit. So actually we use it and it's very concrete. And I think that's helpful in sort of creating a little bit of that propagation and making sure it's sort of in the vernacular with the rest of the team rather than something that we just kind of a lot of times values just put a poster on the wall or to like talk about it. We really try to find ways to enforce it. And if someone's not living those values too, to figure out how to exit them from the company. So we really try to, make it real.
Thank you. It's so important to be able to have that sort of that counterpoint of someone who's been doing this for, nearly 2 decades and grown a team to over 1,000 people, which is tremendous. One of the things that gets the results from that is that you are recognized in the community as someone who has cultivated something noteworthy. I mean, the reason that we're having this interview is because it is remarkable what d.light has accomplished. You're on Times 100 climate list, yet the market that you serve, Africa in particular, still receives well under 5% of the global renewable energy investment. I'm curious about your perspective on the need to influence the policymakers and the financiers who still aren't on board. What do you think is the thing they don't understand, they most misunderstand about energy access at this grid edge?
Yeah, and it's so frustrating kind of seeing the environment in terms of how much investment goes into Africa, versus
Yeah.
other markets. I think the latest stat I saw was like 1% of global renewable energy investment going to Africa,
Wow.
where you have this massive population there. I think the latest number is 1.3, 1.4 billion people. in the continent, but it's growing massively, growing very
Yeah.
fast. And it's, that's the only part of the world where the populations continue to
It,
explode.
that's
And
right.
you're going to have, 25%, 30% of the global population living in Africa in the next 25, 30 years. I mean, it's going to be so many people there, but yet we don't have the energy solution. So there's a huge opportunity, for businesses, for renewable energy, because they don't have the existing infrastructure. So there's the possibility to leapfrog to the next thing, and that's what we're seeing in our markets. Is people skip landlines; they went right to mobile phones. It's the same with solar. People are going to skip this fossil fuel powered grid and go right to either a renewable powered grid or decentralized renewable solutions like what we have, where
Yeah.
you don't need the grid to come. You could just have solar on your roof and a battery. And, this is where developed markets are eventually going to move to, because everyone wants like their solar panels on the roof and, batteries. And I think Africa can actually lead the way. And I think people don't, and investors don't think about the market that way. They just see it as super high risk, currency is volatile, it's unstable. So we're just going to avoid it. Whereas actually, when you look at the market, there's huge opportunity for innovations. And because you don't have the legacy infrastructure there, you can actually jump to the next thing much more quickly. And you saw it with mobile money. The adoption of mobile money was so fast. The adoption of mobile phones were just so much faster than in the US, because people didn't have an alternative. And I think investors overlook that and just kind of look at Africa as like, yeah, this is it's just too hard and too risky. But actually, if you look at it, that is so much opportunity there. So I wish there would be a change of mindset about
Yeah.
it. There are challenges. I mean, I won't be. It's not an easy place necessarily to do business always, but there's also, I think a lot of opportunity to really like create innovation at scale.
And the good news is there's an excellent organization called d.light that has built partnerships across the continent that folks can now partner with. You have one of the best purview on the development side of what the next versions of technology could look like. I'd love to peer into that crystal ball with you. What do you see around the corner, and how is d.light thinking about continuing to evolve the impact that you have on these communities?
There's a lot of really interesting developments, and I think you go a number of different angles with this question. I think we could probably nerd out on this for a while, but I think there's really interesting innovation in e-mobility that's happening
Yeah.
in the continent, and you have electric buses, electric bikes, that you could use for transport, and so like some start of setting up charging infrastructure in these markets. Because it's cheaper actually for customers to charge up with electricity than it is
Yeah.
through gas. So you're going to see that adoption go like really fast. I think in the very early stages of it, but that's a huge area. I think also just when you look at appliances, so as we provide energy access, the next step is like what appliances are going to be used on that with that
Yeah.
infrastructure. And with solar, here you have sort of like a fixed amount of power on a roof. So actually efficiency of the appliances becomes super important. And we've done some work with some of the appliances we provide today, whether that's like fans or TVs or radios, making them very energy efficient so people have a great experience. But I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity with sort of a larger scale energy efficient appliances, whether that's like refrigeration. That's a really exciting area. And there's really cool innovation around like super efficient fridges. And that's very life changing when people get access to that, and many other sorts of appliances that I think there'll be some really cool innovation that we'll continue to see. And then there's the battery storage side, and that's cool because the EV industry is driving a lot of that tech development, and we're just continuing to benefit from that. So the solar costs are going down, storage is getting better and better. And I think we're going to see that continue to kind of drive kind of value for money, better value for money every year, and these kinds of product offerings for years to come.
Yep. I think that a lot of folks have looked at developing countries, Latin America, Africa, India, and the entrepreneurs who pursue them as markets that survive on hopium. And I'm so encouraged in this conversation that companies like d.light have taken this innovation around harnessing sunlight and turned it into a business model that provides real, tangible, financial return and freedom for families and improves their education. We haven't talked about all the tertiary benefits that come from access to clean electricity. And I imagine d.light sort of functions as a store at this point where you provide your users with options for how they can not only improve electrification of their livelihood, but also finance it.
That's exactly it. I mean, we provide sort of a whole menu of options for our customers, so they can, if they can only afford the most basic thing, they can at least have light. But then if they can afford something more, they can have something much more comprehensive. And as you say, there's so many tertiary impacts of these kinds of products that we get, amazed by. Obviously, it's like kids can study longer at night and people can keep the shops open longer, make more income. But, even seeing like some of the health impacts too, because when kids are breathing in those kerosene fumes, it's not good for their lungs, not good for their development. And we've seen like so many stories, and heard so many stories from the families we serve. Like my kid, he had this terrible asthma before. And now once we got your product, got rid of the kerosene lantern, he's not wheezing anymore. He's like running around. So, I mean, we just hear, and those aren't really necessarily documented so well because those are anecdotal, but we know that's happening at quite a large scale when people get access to energy and just the kind of human development and flourishing. We know when people get access to energy, that leads to flourishing, and that's something that we want to see, continue. And we really believe in. And I think the impacts are more than I think we even can realize when people get access to energy. Because we always are sort of amazed and continue to hear stories of just people feeling like I have more dignity now because I have, I have light in my home. I'm not off the grid, so I'm like connected to the rest of the world. It's really quite fulfilling and satisfying to see and be part of.
That's tremendous. And what a great legacy for you all as entrepreneurs. And certainly, thinking about the time in that inception moment for Sam back in Benin to be able to come back to the continent and say, I did this this wasn't a tourist activity for me. I wish that more folks could get involved in international development like that. A lot of our listeners are entrepreneurs. And I want to bring this back to that aspect of grit and tenacity it takes to build a company. I mean, can you help us tap into that mindset of what it really takes to do something like this for now going on 20 years? A lot of the culture around entrepreneurship these days is like build it and flip it, like try to sell it. Not a long-term vision of having a legacy business that could be around for 100 years, something I believe d.light could do. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's something I think about a lot, and it's interesting because when I look at sort of my cohort in business school, I think I'm probably one of the only entrepreneurs still doing the same thing. People say, "Oh, you're still doing the same thing," but I think
It's like it's some negative,
right? Yeah, but it does to really create something at scale that creates this kind of transformation, especially in emerging markets. It takes time, and I think I've nearly burned out multiple times doing this. I mean, I won't sugarcoat it. I mean, it's been challenging. I mean, it's been ups and there's been downs, near-death experiences, all that kind of stuff. And it can be very, very stressful. And I think that, what I've really learned over time is that, what I advise other entrepreneurs who are kind of on a similar journey is you got to find ways to recharge your battery, and we need you for the long run. So that's what I would tell any entrepreneurs listening to this today. Keep in mind that this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. There may be periods where you have to sprint, but ultimately you got to pace yourself. You have to find things, whether it's with family or friends, spiritual stuff, whatever it is, find ways to recharge yourself. And also find a way to cultivate a sense of identity outside of the business that you created. Because I think as an entrepreneur, our identities can get very wrapped up in this thing that we've created, and it makes sense. I mean, that's sort of there's a natural aspect to that where I think we can fall into it. But the problem is then if the company's doing well, your head can get big. If the company's not doing well, you could feel terrible and feel like you don't have a sense of self-worth. So you have to find a way to like care deeply, but also not be intertwined with your sense of identity. And that's something that just takes, I don't know it's not something that happens overnight, but it's something to be conscious of and to work on, because I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs really burn out, and myself included, because they have themselves too intertwined with the company. So that if the company isn't doing well, they're not doing well. And that's not good for anybody.
Najib, I feel like you're reading my journal, man. Which is to say, I and many others identify with exactly what you have just enunciated. I'm a decade in, and honestly, I never anticipated, perhaps most people might not imagine this, I never anticipated that I'd still be sort of doing SunCast 10 years later in the version or form that it is right now. So I totally appreciate that, and it resonates deeply for me, and I know for many of our friends that are listening.
Yeah.
Najib, as we wrap here, if you had the attention of every policymaker, every investor, every entrepreneur for just 60 seconds, a YouTube short, what would you tell them about tackling problems that seem impossible?
Well, I would say that, first of all, it requires almost this naive optimism. So we set this crazy goal when we started of getting 100 million people off of kerosene, which seemed impossible. We're actually at 200 million now, which is insane. So we've achieved that huge goal. But what I found is, in setting that goal that high at the beginning, it attracted the partners, the team. It sort of like manifested, itself, because we believed it, and we attracted people who wanted to believe it with us, and that made it possible. I'm not saying just, it will automatically manifest itself, but it sort of creates a possibility for it when you set a big, ambitious goal and then get a lot of like really smart people kind of aligned with you and to push it forward. So I think that, setting that ambition, high is important. And then, coupling that with the grit and the perseverance, because, entrepreneurship, it is tough. It is not like the easiest road. It's one that can be incredibly fulfilling and gratifying and all of that. And I mean, I love it, but it's, you really need to kind of find a way to find that perseverance and have that sense of, this is a marathon, and I can't be sprinting constantly, because to make meaningful change at scale, it takes time, and it means you're going to have to go through some hardship, most likely, almost certainly.
Yeah.
And I think, having, kind of like being spiritually prepared for that, and mentally prepared, emotionally prepared, all of that, and having some of the places where you can recharge yourself is so important, because, as I was saying earlier, I mean, I've seen, too many other entrepreneurs just burn themselves out because it just gets too hard. So I think that's what I would say. Set the ambitions high, but then and be naively optimistic on the one side. On the other side, you got to find that grit and the perseverance, knowing that it's the road to get there, if you want to make meaningful change, is going to be a rocky one.
Well, I want to say, congratulations on getting to 200 plus million people. Like, the road to 1 billion is at this point within reach, right? It's something that you can not only visualize, but see your way to achieving.
Yeah, we can see it.
And, yeah, it's amazing. And that, like many things, it grows logarithmically. The path from 100 to 200 was far faster than 0 to 100. I know that there are a lot of folks listening who, not like me, identify so deeply with the journey you've been on. If folks want to reach out, if they want to connect, if they want to follow along, how do you like to be found? What's the best way for folks to plug in?
Yeah, the best way would just be go to our website, d.light.com. We have a quarterly newsletter you can subscribe to, and you can reach out to me on social media, and feel free to reach out if you want to connect. And that's the best way.
Fantastic. We'll link to the LinkedIn for Najib, and that is the letter D, the word light, like the light in your house.com. Ned Tozun is co-founder and CEO of d.light, bringing electricity, light, hope, and equity to the darker places on our planet, to the places that nonetheless deserve the kinds of access and illumination that we all take for granted. Najib, I'm super inspired by the work that you're doing. Keep it up, my friend.
Thank you, Nico.
Hey, I hope that conversation was a delight for you. It certainly was for me. Najib, I'm really honored that you took the time. I also want to say a super thank you to my friend Josh Dorfman over at Super Cool, who helped connect the dots for us and Najib. This conversation is one I've been longing for years, and I was only slightly jealous when I saw my friend Josh kick off his podcast, Super Cool, with Najib, and I just had to get him as a guest. So if you haven't checked out Super cool. You should definitely do that. Super.cool. They're really doing a fantastic job trouncing us on YouTube, at least in terms of followers. If you haven't gone and subscribed and followed us on YouTube, please do that so that we can catch up with Super Cool. But please do go check out the conversations that Josh and his crew are putting together. I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope that you'll subscribe and continue to come back, because this is what we do on the front lines of the clean energy transition, helping connect you with those leaders who are out there doing the thing. Maybe you want to join them and become a part of their team. We've had countless of you tell us that that is exactly how you've gotten your job. So thank you for giving us that feedback. I want to hear from you. How is SunCast impacting you? You can easily email us at team@suncast.me and share your story. But the easiest way that you could really make an impact for us is leaving us a rating and review, or sharing the episode on LinkedIn, as many of you have done. Thank you so much for doing that. It helps other intentional, mission-minded folks just like you and me tap into the leaders that can help them take that next step. Thank you as well to our sponsors who help make sure that all you have to do is pay attention. They pay the bills and take care of everything else for us. Thank you to my wonderful team, our executive editor, Chris Mottram, our podcast producer, Herman Chalet, our amazing operations manager, Jeremy Pingle, and our extended team who help ensure that SunCast arrives at your doorstep each and every week. Please tune in again next week. And in the meantime, remember, you are what you listen to. Thanks again for showing up, Solar Warrior. It's half the battle.